ayes have it. And I call the Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I move that the House, 1, acknowledges the devastation across our nation occasioned by the bushfire season, including the loss of 33 lives, the destruction of over 3,000 homes, the unimaginable loss of so much wildlife and the devastating impact on regional economies across Australia. 2, extends its deepest sympathies to families who have lost loved ones and to those who have suffered injuries or loss. Places 3, on record its gratitude for the service of David Morrison, Geoffrey Keaton, Andrew O'Dwyer, Samuel McCall, Bill Slade, Matt Kavanagh, Ian Macbeth, Paul Hudson and Richter Morgan Jr, firefighters who lost their lives during the fires, and extends its deepest condolences to their families. 4, recognises the contributions of thousands of volunteers and career firefighters and the dedication of emergency services personnel across Australia. 5, honours the contribution of more than 6,500 Australian Defence Force personnel, including 3,000 ADF reservists, and the work of Emergency Management Australia throughout the summer. 6, recognises the generosity of individuals, families, schools, churches and religious groups, service clubs and businesses from across Australia and elsewhere in the world during the evacuations and following the fires. 7, expresses its gratitude to Australia's friends, allies and neighbours who have provided or offered support. 8, recognises the unceasing efforts and close cooperation between state and local governments, demonstrating the strength of our federation. 9, commits itself to learning any lessons from this fire season. And 10, pledges the full support of the Australian Parliament to assist affected areas to recover and to rebuild. Mr Speaker, we welcome the families of those who were lost and who are here with us today. In past times, when Australia has been tested by fire, we have given the fires a name based on the name of a day or a locality. Black Thursday in 1851, Black Friday in 1939, Ash Wednesday in 1983, the Canberra bushfires of 2003, and Black Saturday in 2009. Just saying these words brings back such chilling memories. This year we have faced, and we are still facing, a terrible season of fire. National in scale, fires that reached our highest mountain range and our longest beaches. Fires that consumed forests, grasslands and farms, suburbs and villages. Fires that jumped rivers and highways. Fires where days became night and the night sky turned red. Fires that raged into the heavens as clouds of fire. With it all, a merciless smoke that lingered across our cities. Fires that still burn. And the smoke from burned bushland that left an oppressive tightening in our chests told us that all was not right. This is the black summer of 2019-20 that has proven our national character and our resolve. A national trauma best described by Indigenous leaders who love our land so much as a grief for the victims, a heartache for our wildlife and broken heart for the scarring of our land. These fires are yet to end, and danger is still before us in many, many places. But today we gather to mourn, honour, reflect and begin to learn from the black summer that continues, and to give thanks for the selflessness, the courage and the sacrifice and generosity that met these fires time and again and continue to. Many of the stories of our Black Summer we will never know. Some will become known, and others have already been taken to our hearts as Australians. Across Australia, we witnessed unparalleled firefighting and relief efforts. Thousands upon thousands have stood together to fight fires and protect communities. While our hearts are heavy for the loss of 33 people and the destruction of over 3,000 homes, we know our emergency services and our ADF personnel, our firefighters, have undertaken a mighty effort to save so many more homes, so many more communities, and so many more lives. Along with the loss and at times seeming failure, there has been perseverance, courage, and a willingness to give all to prevail. None has given more than the 9 firefighters we lost. And I extend again my welcome today to the many family members of our lost firefighters who are with us today. I also welcome the Ambassador of the United States, Ambassador Culverhouse, who stands here in the stead of 3 American families who also gave and lost so much. Every one of these firefighters was loved, all were brave, and had lives that meant so much to those around them. At the funeral of Jeshri Keaton, there was a coffee mug. A mug no different than most of the dads here have sure seen at some time. It was a mug that was placed on Jeff's coffin, and it had the words, "Daddy, I love you to the moon and back." Jeff's son Harvey was 19 months old when he lost his father. Jeff's fiancée, Jess, held their son as they mourned his loss together with his family. Jeff died alongside his fellow volunteer Andrew Dwyer from the Horsley Park Brigade, an amazing group of people, fighting the Greenwaddle Creek fire. Jeff and Andrew were mates, together with their captain Darren, who has honoured them on so many times now. Some even referred to them as brothers, new dads too, together with their children born only days apart. Andrew's daughter Charlotte, almost 2, was also at his funeral, where Jenny and I joined them, innocently unaware of her horrible and terrible loss. Charlotte was wearing a little white dress, and she had pigtails that only her mother Melissa could have lovingly made. And on top of those pigtails, she put on her father's white firefighting helmet. Like Jeff, Andrew loved what he did, with the brigade captain Darren Nation saying his love of the fire brigade was as thick as the blood that ran through his veins. Like Jeff and Jess and Andrew and Melissa, they shared a life together of such promise that is so sadly now a memory. We lost David Morrison fighting a fire in East Gippsland. He was a husband, a father and a grandfather. He had been supervising the creation of vital fire breaks and died in a vehicle rollover. He was a bushman. He loved to shoot, fish and hunt. He had planned on Boxing Day to travel to the Philippines to help build a school there. He'd already supported the building of schools in Thailand. And we lost Sam McPaul. He was just 28, the world at his feet, married to Megan for just a year and a half, expecting their first child. The son of a loving single mum, Chris, for whom Sam was her entire world. There will come a day when that young boy or girl will imagine what their father was like and will ask questions. And when that day comes, we want that precious child to know that their dad was even better than they could have ever imagined. He was the best of us. Matt Kavanagh was also a young father, 2 children, 6-year-old Reuben and 4-year-old Kate, a devoted husband. Loved his fly fishing and had been a member of the Forest Fire Management Victoria for 10 years. And on the day of the accident, he'd been extinguishing unattended campfires. His older brother Mike said his family had lost the most special person in the world. Bill Slade was just as loved, and his wife Carol, daughter Stephanie, and son Ethan know how much he was loved. Bill had worked in land and fire management for 40 years and was about to retire. It was said there was no one more experienced and no one as fit as well. Bill even fought the Ash Wednesday fires in 1983. He was described as a true gentleman with the kindness and gentlest of souls. When I spoke to Ethan and Stephanie, they could not have been more proud, but also more devastated by their loss. When we thought we couldn't hurt any more, we lost 3 men who had travelled half a world to protect us. And we honour our American friends. We have no greater friend than the United States. Captain Ian Macbeth, First Officer Paul Hudson and Flight Engineer Rick Morgan Jr., who were lost to us when their C-130 Hercules aircraft crashed near Peak View. Captain Macbeth, who was an experienced firefighting pilot, is survived by his wife and 3 children. He had served in Iraq and Afghanistan and was a member of the Montana Air National Guard. His daughter, training to be a pilot herself, said she wanted everyone to know he was just a wonderful person. First Officer Hudson had served in the Marine Corps for 20 years, including as a C-130 pilot. He is from Buckeye, Arizona, and survived by his wife, Noreen. Across Arizona, they lowered flags in his honour. And Flight Engineer De Morgan has served in the US Air Force with 18 years as a flight engineer on the C-130. It was said his passion was flying and his children. Mr Speaker, on Australia Day, I announced that the National Emergency Medal would be declared for the Black Summer of 2019-20 for these fires. The New South Wales Rural Fire Service and Forest Fire Management Victoria have advised that once the bushfire response is complete and eligibility criteria for the medal has been set, all 9 of these firefighters who have lost their lives will be nominated to be posthumously awarded the National Emergency Medal. In addition, the government has reconsidered the criteria of eligibility for the National Medal. This is Australia's most awarded civilian medal, with more than 237,000 medals awarded since its inception. It recognises the long and diligent service by members of eligible Australian government and community organisations that risk their lives or safety to protect and assist the community. It is awarded after 15 years of service. It has not been awarded posthumously to long-term members or eligible organisations who have lost their lives in the line of duty. I'm also pleased to announce that Her Majesty has agreed to amend the regulations for the National Medal to be awarded posthumously. This change will allow the National Medal to be awarded to those who died in the service of their duty and who would have reached 15 years' service if not for their death. This amendment will be retrospective to the creation of the medal in 1975, meaning that others who have died in the service of others will now be eligible. Mr Speaker, we've witnessed the most remarkable actions through these fires by our volunteers and our Defence Forces in recent months. Tens and thousands of volunteers, all of them doing things that were extraordinary, although they would consider themselves ordinary. Joined by 6,500 Defence Force personnel, including 3,000 reservists, who were compulsorily called out. So much of it is difficult and dangerous work, ordinary people, extraordinary actions. One New South Wales fiery, Alex Newcomb, up near Blackheath, returned to the fireground just 12 weeks after a kidney transplant. His doctors weren't pleased. But as Alex said, it's just what we do. We get stuck in. His kidney donor was none other than his wife, Kate, a fellow firefighter in the same brigade. Alex had been a volunteer for 20 years. And on 21 December, his truck was overrun by flames. The truck had run out of water, meaning it couldn't activate the sprinkler system. After all he'd been through, it was touch and go. He drove his crew to safety. That's the story of the summer. Remarkable Australians, standing by each other, struggling, persevering, taking the wins where they could find them. And it wasn't just firefighters. Behind our fire crews have been caterers, logistics officers, radio operators, fire control centres, and a support apparatus that did not sleep. And our communities were backed up by volunteers at evacuation centres, service groups such as the CWA, Rotary and Lions, and wildlife groups such as WISE. and the charities, the Salvos, St Vinny's, and so many more. Some of it was organised, some of it not. Together, these efforts resulted in the most tremendous outpouring of generosity our country has seen. Big businesses, small businesses, superstars, mums, dads, all giving what they could. That was the wonder of this summer. Tens of thousands of volunteers fighting fires, then joined by 25 million of their countrymen and women supporting them, trusting each other, backing each other. 25 million acts of kindness, all of them reminding us about the country we love. More than money, it spoke of our resolve, a reminder that what unites us as Australians is always more enduring and lasting than what divides us. And with every action, a reminder of who we are, like the owners of the Indian restaurant in Gippsland I referred to on Australia Day, who cooked thousands of free meals of curry and rice. The chemist at Malua Bay, who despite their own home burning down and not having an electronic payment system, kept the pharmacy open to get the medicines through. The businesses, including up in Yeppoon, who saw a survivor and took no payment for clothes or meals. The wildlife volunteers, one who even gave the shirt off her own back, looking for koalas, kangaroos, wallabies, wombats to tend and protect. The men from the Islamic community in Auburn who drove 6 hours to Willawarren with 30 kilograms of sausages to cook a barbecue for a devastated community. That's faith. The convoys of trucks that took supplies through to communities that needed them, an army of angels that loaded 150 trucks of supplies and got them to Buchan and Omeo. The tradies who knocked on doors and at no charge climbed on roofs and cleared the gutters of local homes. The families who opened up their own homes to strangers. And the children, cake stalls, lemonade stalls, giving away their pocket money and their Christmas money. The kids of this country give us every reason to hope. The generosity of the rest of the world was also so humbling. 70 nations offered us assistance. Over 300 firefighters sent from the United States, Canada and to New Zealand, to whom we are so grateful. We also had offers of assistance from the UAE, which is greatly appreciated. Military assistance from New Zealand, the United States, Indonesia, Malaysia, Korea, Singapore, Japan. Our wonderful family in PNG and Fiji. When the 54 engineers from the Republic of Fiji military forces arrived in Melbourne, they placed their hands over their heart and they sung a hymn, Angels Watching Over Me, and they have been to us. Our Pacific family has been so incredibly generous. Our neighbours such as Vanuatu, Tuvalu, the Solomon Islands have given generously, from not much, reminding me of the widow's mite, to our bushfire relief. In PNG's second largest city of Lae, the young people began a wheelbarrow push collecting donations and giving them to our consulate. Having stepped up for our Pacific family, we are now being so blessed by seeing our closest neighbours step up for us. We are so grateful to our Pacific family. The actions of every level of government have been exemplary, and I pay tribute to our premiers, to their agencies and local governments who have all been doing exceptional work, and I acknowledge Commissioner Fitzsimmons, who's here today. Amazing job, Shane. In our own ranks, I want to acknowledge those wonderful workers, the electorate staff, the members here, not just the members that sit on this side, all members in this and the other place, and their teams who have worked under extraordinary pressure. As members of this place, we are all so proud of our colleagues and what they've done during this time, and those who serve with them. Across government, there have been tremendous efforts, and I want to acknowledge the standing contribution of Emergency Manager Australia and its Director-General, Rob Cameron, who was here with us today. I also pay tribute to the contribution of our Australian Defence Forces. 6,500 personnel have been providing that support in the field, at sea, in the air, and from defence bases and fire-affected communities going back to September of last year, and continue out there today. That includes these reservists, the first compulsory call-out of reserves in our history for these purposes. The compulsory call-out will end this Friday. The ADF Task Force is led by Major General Jake Elwood, as he's known, have been undertaking vital on-the-ground tasks like delivering emergency food and water, evacuating stranded people, reopening roads, restoring services, clearing debris, building fences and burying dead animals. This reflects the transition of ADF support from assisting to save lives and properties to relief and recovery operations. Their sheer presence just presented such encouragement and boosted morale when Australians so devastated could look up and see them there, and they knew they were supported. They will continue to provide that support wherever it's needed, for as long as it's needed, with the full-time forces and those now volunteer reservists. The recovery operations require a whole-of-government response, and that is why we've established the National Bushfire Recovery Agency under the leadership of former AFP Commissioner Andrew Colvin. It is overseeing a National Bushfire Recovery Fund which will support all recovery efforts across Australia over the next 2 years and for as long as it takes. We've allocated an additional $2 billion to fund this agency to ensure families, farmers, business owners and communities hit by these fires get the support they need as they recover, working closely with our colleagues in state and territory governments. Already the government has made major commitments providing funding for clean-up operations, tourism support, wildlife recovery, local government assistance, small business reconstruction, primary producers, farmers, graziers and families, as well as vital mental health support. In addition to that, over $100 million already provided in emergency payments. However, today is not the day to speak in detail of these initiatives. Today is the day for memorial and commemoration. We know that recovery takes time, and we are all here for the long haul. Mr Speaker, following a natural disaster of this magnitude, we must also heed the lessons. These fires have been befuelled by one of the worst droughts on record, changing in our climate and a build-up in fuel amongst other factors. Our summers are getting longer, drier and hotter. That's what climate change does, and that requires a new responsiveness, resilience and a reinvigorated focus on adaptation. Today I've written to the Premiers and Chief Minister to seek their feedback on the draft terms of reference for a Royal Commission that I've flagged now for several weeks, along the terms that I've outlined in public. The Royal Commission will be led by former Chief of the Defence Force Air Chief Marshal Mark Binskin, AC, and it will shine a light on what needs to be done to make our country safer and our communities more resilient. We owe it to those we have lost. We owe it to those who have fought these fires. We owe it to our children and to land itself to learn from the lessons that are necessary. Mr Speaker, over a century ago, Henry Lawson wrote a poem about a bushfire in a place called Dingo Scrub. It is daylight again and the fire is past, and the black scrub silent and grim, except for the blaze of an old dead tree or the crash of a falling limb. In his reminiscence, Lawson writes about 3 men who wipe away tears of smoke and put themselves in harm's way to save a family. And when the fire is past, he writes of the men, when they're wanted again in Dingo Scrubs, they'll be there to do the work. And that's what we'll all do, here in this House and across Australia, to do the work of recovery, to build back better, to do the work of learning, to do the work of repairing shattered hearts, broken communities. That is what we owe our country. That is what we owe each other. Australians are overcomers. Despite the scale of this disaster and the tragedies, Australia is not and will never be overwhelmed. As we face the challenges that remain active, as we confront and face the devastating drought compounded in so many places by these fires, as we confront and contain the challenge of the virus, indeed, that threatens the world, Australians will not be overwhelmed. We will overcome, as our national anthem encourages us with, courage all. Let us proclaim, advance Australia fair. So I conclude in memorial. I conclude in thanks. I conclude in honour to those we have lost and the deepest of our sympathies and condolences to you, and we just simply hope and pray that as we've gathered here today to acknowledge your great loss, and the heroes you have lost, that this will make your journey just that little bit easier.
The Leader of the Opposition.
I thank the Prime Minister for agreeing to the proposal for today to be devoted to this important motion of condolence and commemoration. And I honour the families of those who have lost loved ones who are joining us here today. We are united in shock and in sadness. Lives lost, dreams shattered, homes destroyed, communities devastated, native animals pushed to extinction, livelihoods gone up in flames. So much of our country has been consumed by fire. And yet amongst this terrible loss, we have seen bravery, we have seen courage, and we have seen resilience. We have seen our fellow Australians up against the inferno. We've seen our fellow Australians on the beach in unimaginable scenes, huddled together in midday darkness with nowhere to turn but the sea. A horrific illustration that this was anything but business as usual. The impact of our changing climate tragically played out before us, those directly affected, but also those who were far away from the flames, but who could see, smell, and indeed touch its fallout. We do yet not know fully what we have lost because we are still losing it. It's not over. Australia is still burning. It's significant that in the past, some of our worst fires have been after the date on which we commemorate this motion. On the weekend, the fires burnt their way into yet another month on the calendar. This catastrophic fire season, which stretches right back across summer but began in spring, has taken so much. It has taken lives and it has taken loved ones. For those who've been lost and those who've lost partners, family or friends, it has stolen the future. For many who have seen their homes and the physical, sentimental accumulations of lifetimes gone up in flames, it has robbed the past. It has hit the economy, but just how greatly is something we cannot yet piece together. It has hit our society. It has taken a toll on mental health, and we will be feeling the reverberations for some time yet. It has taken so much of our unique wildlife that it is going to take us a while to even measure the full scale of the calamity. But through it all, we've seen our brave firefighters. They do not want to be there, but they feel compelled. They feel a powerful sense of duty. They feel driven by the overwhelming notion that when it comes to defending their communities, their country and their fellow Australians, their contribution matters, that their contribution counts, that their contribution can make the difference. We've been humbled by the arrival of so many foreign firefighters who've come, not to defend their homes, but in the name of humanity and in the name of friendship. And we've been amazed by the crews on the planes and helicopters attacking the fire from above. As we have been reminded so tragically, it is a dangerous task. We are awed by all of them, by their courage and their sacrifice. It is an awe that has taken on a terrible sense of regularity, but the awe never feels just routine. Our brave women and men who get into those trucks and those aircraft have no illusions about what they're up against, and yet they keep going, day after day, week after week, month after month. They head back into these hellscapes. They live with moments of fear. They live with long stretches of boredom. They live with exhaustion and moments of adrenaline. They witness suffering, both human and animal. Those who haven't experienced the fires directly get glimpses of it through video footage of fire trucks dwarfed by ember storm and fireball. Even when it's shrunk onto the small screen and viewed from the safety of our homes and workplaces, it is simply terrifying. The devastating impact of a changing climate seen around the world and felt, touched and smelt by Australians hundreds of kilometres from the fires. We offer our deepest gratitude to their families who are also put through it again and again and again. We cannot doubt how proud these families are of the firefighter in their midst. And indeed, as I've travelled around the country, that is the sense that you get. And indeed, in the morning tea hosted by the Prime Minister this morning, these extraordinary family members in mourning of their loved ones, but proud of their wonderful contribution to their fellow Australians and the sacrifice that they have made. Alongside the professionals, so many of our firefighters are volunteers. I've met them around the country. One of the things that strikes you when you meet them is just what extraordinary Australians they are. Meeting people in Bilpin, one gentleman in December on Christmas Eve who'd begun fighting fires in Tenterfield in September in northern New South Wales. A firefighter, Mike, in Cuddly Creek in the Adelaide Hills, who, when I said to him, "So how long have you been going here for? Have you had a break at all?" He'd been going for a couple of weeks. He said, "Just a couple of weeks here." I said, "Oh, that's pretty tough." He said, "Oh yeah, but before then," and he went on to outline, he'd been in the Hawkesbury, he'd been on the north coast of New South Wales. When I was with Susan Templeman on Australia Day in the Blue Mountains, we went to Glenbrook, and there the head of the local rural fire service, who we were chatting with there, said, "Oh, not all the brigade are here today because some of them have gone off to Moruya yesterday." These are men and women who have been fighting fires for months, protecting their own homes and yet going to help their fellow Australians. I met people in Nowra, in the Hawkesbury, who were there protecting other communities but were worried about what was happening where they lived. But in the meantime, from travelling to another destination, the fires had then been brought much closer to their own homes. But they stayed, protecting strangers' homes. Quite remarkable. And it is important, and I support very much the proposal that we honour these Australians with appropriate recognition into the future. When our brave volunteers keep giving us so much over such a long time at such a cost to themselves, it is time also, though, I believe we'll have to consider expressing our gratitude in a more practical way in the future. It is not sustainable for people to not receive an income over such a long period of time, and I'm pleased that that was recognised during this crisis. But we do need to, in any assessment, look at what the changing climate and the changing expectations of future events mean for the way that we structure our response. So through this bushfire crisis, it has been an honour and very humbling to engage directly with people in these affected communities. Firefighters, volunteers, small business owners, defence personnel, local government, men, women, girls and boys. I've listened to their stories and heard their practical suggestions. Throughout this crisis, Labor has been constructive in forwarding proposals for national coordination for resources and support for our firefighters, including our volunteers in affected communities. I want to acknowledge the fact that Minister Littleproud has returned every call and has responded to every request that I have made, which has been pretty regular, it's got to be said, working with our Shadow Minister, Murray Watt. We are guided by a single thought, that as Australians we are all in this together. Working together is our only way forward. I have every confidence that as Australians that is what we will do. That is who we are. We have been tested in so many ways. It will not surprise anyone that the toughest of times has brought out the very best in Australians. I've been humbled by it as I've travelled through the fire zones. It is what so many of us across Australia have seen, and indeed it is what so many have lived through. Neighbour helping neighbour, friend helping friend, stranger helping stranger, human comforting animal. Through the long hell of this bushfire season, we have held each other. We have lent each other our shoulders. We have pushed through. Communities have pulled together. We must acknowledge the crucial work that has been done by the ABC, a proud national institution, in keeping communities informed and up to date in what is often a dangerous and fast-changing environment. To say our national broadcaster has been indispensable is simply an understatement. Likewise, we must acknowledge the vital and tireless efforts of the personnel from our parks and forest management bodies. We also thank all of our maritime workers and our defence personnel who've thrown themselves into the effort. We have done everything in our power to hold on to hope. Just as we have seen hope rewarded, we have seen it defeated. As this season of fire has reminded us, none of us is invincible. Each death leaves a terrible hole in a community. Each death is the cruelest of blows to a family, one that inflicts a hurt that may one day soften, but will never fade. We feel each one of them in our hearts. As a nation, we have lost our own. We have also lost those who crossed the sea to help us. We embrace them as our own. We think of the names, that tragically growing list of names. Each one of those names belonged to a human being who was the centre of a universe. Each one a name that no one will answer to anymore. But we hold on to them. Among those we have lost, Geoffrey Keaton and Andrew O'Dwyer, firefighters, also young fathers. I got to meet Geoffrey's son Harvey before, a wonderful young boy, and Andrew's daughter Charlotte. They were born just days apart. Our hearts break to see children so small and so young attending their father's funerals. Fighter Samuel McPaul, whose child is due in May and will only ever know him second hand. His wife Megan will never see him holding their baby. She will never see him give his first fatherly kiss. They will not share the first steps, the first words, the first birthday or the first day at school. But that baby will grow up knowing they are the child of an amazing man and one who we're all proud of. Bill Slater, veteran firefighter who picked up his first fire hose in 1979. A husband, a father, a proud member of the Australian Workers' Union. He fought fires on Ash Wednesday and Black Saturday before he threw himself into what would prove his final fight in the East Gippsland blaze. His heartbroken wife Carol said via a relative, "I will miss him. I will miss the great times we had yet to come." Dick Lang and his son Clayton Lang. Dick was a pioneering bush pilot and a safari operator. Clayton was a talented plastic and reconstructive surgeon. Father and son had been fighting fire on Kangaroo Island for 2 days when they lost the fight. You will not be forgotten. The 3 Americans lost in the crash of the Lockheed C-130 Hercules air tanker. Captain Ian Macbeth, First Officer Paul Clyde Hudson and Flight Engineer Rick De Morgan Jr. They came for us. We talk about friendship between nations. This was that friendship expressed at the profoundest level. Father and son, Robert and Patrick Solway. They stayed to defend their home in Cobargo and their precious hard-earned farming equipment. Patrick's wife Renee wrote, "We are broken." Our hearts embrace Patrick and Renee's young son, who will grow up with a father who lives on in memory and the stories told by those who knew him and loved him. There have been so many, we mourn each and every one of them. As the fires finally leave, communities are left to deal with the aftermath, physical, financial, and perhaps most importantly, emotional. Then there is wildlife that, having miraculously survived the inferno, is left in desperate need of the second miracle, namely finding food and shelter amid the desolation. So what now? Yes, fire is part of who we are. Our recorded history is heavy with its grim poetry. Ash Wednesday, Black Friday, Red Tuesday, Black Saturday. But we are at a turning point. This is not business as usual. This is not even fire as usual. We can no longer fall back on the poetry of Dorothy McKellar and comfort ourselves with the thought that it's always been like this, that this is the price we pay for living on a beautiful but sometimes harsh and unforgiving continent. Nor can we soften reality with the fiction that we had no way of predicting this. We have no choice but to turn to face the harsh new reality. The scale and intensity of the fires has been unprecedented, but the responses to the fire from our fellow Australians has been completely as expected. There has been toughness, resilience, generosity, and amazingly through it all, there has been a sense of humour. All of these qualities have been put to the test during this time of fire, and Australians have shown their true character. In this time of upheaval, the only certainty we have is that they will be tested again. We must be ready. I pay my respects to all those today who have lost loved ones. I pay my respects also to those who are still suffering physically and mentally, and say that we as a parliament will provide every assistance, and I'm sure that we can all agree on that. I also pay tribute in conclusion to all those extraordinary men and women who have, in the face of incredible danger to themselves, have put their fellow Australians, their communities and their nation before their own interests. We thank you, we praise you, we honour you.